Thank you for staying with us. Now, it's day 3, which has seen continuous military action between Russia and Ukraine, with some military casualties on both sides. We don't have the latest figures, but as of yesterday, we learned of Russia losing some 450 soldiers, Ukraine losing about 137 soldiers and civilians. That was on day 1. Now, one thing is obvious, there will be no troops on the ground from the US, from the UK and NATO. It seems as if Ukraine has been left to fight alone. However, in the last 48 hours, we've seen some effort at an international global response from the US, the European Union, the UK, Japan, Canada, Taiwan, New Zealand. They've unleashed a series of economic sanctions targeting Russian banks, oil refineries and exports. And so it's economic warfare at its highest point in the modern era, but certainly coming at a cost to others like us in Ghana, where we've seen oil prices surge. We're seeing increasing prices for other food products like wheat. And this will have certainly a multiplier effect. We also have lots of links with students studying in Ukraine and Russia. And so many families must be worried at this time. And so that's the topic for our second segment. Let me welcome Prince Danso Tenakwa, who is the NUGS Ukraine Secretary. You are welcome, Prince. And then we have Dr. Asa Asante still with us, and he's the Director of the Center for European Studies. So really good to have him on this. So Prince, you're studying in Ukraine?
Yes.
If you can speak up a little louder.
Okay, yeah.
You are studying in Ukraine.
Yeah,
how long have you been there?
3 years now.
3 years.
Yeah.
So how come you managed to get out? Because there's a total closure of the airspace.
Well, so when things started getting intense, I decided to just take a bold step, because as at that time, my school had given in the opportunity that, if you want to go, you have to make sure you do the right thing by paying your tuition fee, which is part of your contract. And then you are free to go with a timeline that up to 1st April, you can do online.
Okay.
Yes. So I jumped on that and then I left.
So you're doing online classes?
Yeah.
All right. May I know what you're studying, sir?
Medicine.
You are studying medicine. Okay. Dr. Asa Asante, things seem to have deteriorated over the last 3 days. For those who may not really appreciate the nuances, tell us, why has this exploded to become such a big issue?
You know, it's a difficult one and a very worrying one for all of us. You know, the time of Soviet Union, it was just a federation with all the Eastern European countries as part of that bloc.
Yeah, it was called USSR at that time.
And then the empire got broken in the 90s, and then some of the states became independent and all that. And Ukraine happened to be one. Had their independence. But following from there, Russia has never been happy that, one, its empire got broken, and two, it lost control of some of the countries hitherto were under its control. So Ukraine, for instance, Russia has consistently said that it's part and parcel of its empire, and that, definitely there is always the need to get closer to it. This thing had gone on for a very long time.
We understand the last 8 years where there's been the gradual encroachment from the east.
The build-ups were all that, there were, skirmishes in the air and all that. But we got to this level and you realize that it has become what is so tense. But from that time on, you saw that Russia was building, massing up there in terms of military accoutrements, in terms of military power and all that. And, Western world had also played their role to make sure that things don't degenerate. But events of recent time has given us a different picture that, look, what they thought Russia would not do is what Russia has done. Mm-hmm. Now, Russia has invaded Ukraine.
Okay.
And then we have all manner of difficulties. Mm-hmm. But what is making it so serious is that Russia also, let us remember that as a superpower, and you have a little country such as Ukraine, which is under threat by Russia, it becomes so difficult. In terms of military power, Ukraine doesn't get closer to Russia at all. You know, in terms of even resources, let us remember that Russia is the third largest producer of oil. And all these countries, they use, Europe depends so much on Russian oil and all that. It is the second largest producer of natural gas, which is also dependent on in what Europe. And Russia is supply 1/3 of Europe natural gas. It is the largest energy source for Europe. And then Russia, Portugal, and Spain make use of though little energy, but energy from what? Russia. Germany, the largest European economy, that uses more than half of Russian natural gas resource. So you realize that Russia is a big power there. In terms of even grains, Russia produces a lot of wheat for production of bread and all that. Russia is noted also for production of cheese, which most European countries will depend on. In terms of, even if you talk about France, France nuclear energy inputs, some of them come from Russia. So Russia has put itself in a very solid position that now that he's taken this decision, it's becoming difficult for Europe to tackle him and all that.
There's criticism, though, that the Western powers brought this on because there had been an agreement that there's the red line, and the red line are the eastern states close to Russia, and there was a view that NATO would not seek to annex these states as members. Russia, I understand, takes the view that more and more its territorial security is under threat as more of these Eastern Bloc states wish to align with the West and NATO. So the criticism is that the West should have seen this coming. They shouldn't have thought that Russia will keep silent as it gradually penetrated closer and closer.
Yeah, that's one of the conditions that Russia put it in writing to Americans in the Western world. That look, we are getting some of my former, members as part of NATO. I'm not happy with that and all that. But here, the difficult question is that once a state is a sovereign state, it has the right to decide the focus and direction of that country. So you can restrict that because Ukraine, as a sovereign state, can decide to be member of NATO and all that. And that is one of the difficult things that Putin couldn't take. But you realize that an independent state, can decide to take the direction you want to take. Now, we are in this difficult times, and unfortunately, you realize that Ukraine, though the Western world is supporting Ukraine and all that, but they are not getting the needed support right now.
On the ground.
On the ground. Okay. What they need so much now, military support. Okay. But how do you get it? Now the air space has been shut and all that.
And the land. Okay, so let me put a pause then and come to Prince. So Prince, tell me, how are the Ghanaian students left behind? How are they managing?
Well, so
you are in touch with them.
Yeah, I'm in constant communication with them, and they are all okay, but there's still the panic and everything, of which we are trying all we could. Fortunately for us, the government, after constant communication and talks with them, they've all activated their European connection. That's the neighboring countries where you share borders with, Ukraine share borders with. We are trying all we could to push more Ghanaians, our Ghanaians, to use there, and then for a possible evacuation from all those sides. So as of yesterday, about 6 people have successfully passed through Estonia.
Okay, so they've left Ukraine, managed to get into Estonia. Okay.
And then there were a number of people who were also in a queue, who had, as at that time, have stayed in a queue for about 2 to 3 hours in the cold, all trying to use either Poland, Romania, or Slovakia, and then also Hungary as well.
Okay, so you need to speak up a bit more, Prince. I know that these are challenging times. So some have managed to get through to Hungary, you say?
They haven't gotten to Hungary yet.
Or they're on the path to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm just wondering, if there's this crisis situation in Ukraine, how are people able to move then? Because one would think that it's safer to stay indoors or to identify a bunker to hide in. So is it easy to move?
Well, it's not that easy because taxis now are not working. So sometimes you just have to be doing hide and seek. I mean, for the danger zones, hide and seek and get to where we term as the Vokzal or the train station, where, I mean, the government of Ukraine still is giving out trains if you want to leave. But so as it stands now, I mean, nothing has touched the trains and everything.
So transportation is not being targeted?
I mean, for now.
For now?
Yeah.
What has been targeted as far as you know?
Okay, so as far as I know, they are targeting their military bases. And then, I mean, almost every city in Ukraine has a military base. So they are just targeting those sites, and then now they are trying to move into the cities as well. So, and then when they throw the missiles, then Ukraine also tries to, I mean, divert it. Then Ukraine also tries to divert it. So in that case, it makes it a bit difficult to, I mean, calculate what exactly will be the next step in all these things. So as it stands now, like I said, a couple of Ghanaians are, I mean, on board with a train, of which I think I have about a couple of numbers moving to Hungary, Poland. I mean, some are also stuck in Poland because the traffic on the border to Poland is huge. I mean, so they are still there, and then we are hoping that they can get through. But yes, the Ghana embassies in all these areas have been able to speak with the government of those countries, and then Romania, for instance, have given the Ghanaians up to 2 days, up to 2 days for them to, I mean, leave their country. So if you are able to enter from Ukraine to Romania, you have up to 2 days to leave.
So you can't stay for more than 2 days
Exactly.
if you get into Romania.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just read a press release that was issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it says, further to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration's press release of the 24th of February on the deteriorating security situation in Ukraine and the safety of Ghanaian nationals there, the ministry wishes to update the general public as follows. And it's a 6-point statement. It says, 1, the ministry through its mission in Bern, Switzerland, and the honorary consulate in Ukraine are in touch with the Ghanaian students in Ukraine through their leaders. A list of students has been compiled to facilitate an evacuation exercise. And 3, following the closure of the Ukrainian airspace, it's become challenging to airlift our compatriots from Kyiv and other parts of the country. Hence, the only viable means of evacuation is by land to neighboring countries such as Moldova, Belarus, Slovakia, and Hungary. And 4, discussions with authorities in Switzerland, Turkey, Moldova, Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia to assist with the smooth evacuation of Ghanaians in Ukraine at far advance. 5, the officials of the relevant Ghanaian diplomatic missions and honorary consuls are on standby to facilitate the passage of students who had commenced their journey by road to Romania and Hungary. And 6, the government has put in place a necessary package to facilitate the transportation, accommodation, feeding, and medical support to ease burden on our compatriots. As the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration continues to engage with other stakeholders such as the Ghana Scholarships Secretariat, the Security Services, and other state institutions, we urge our compatriots to remain calm as measures are finalized for their imminent safe evacuation. The ministry will keep updating the general public on progress of the evacuation exercise. So that's really in relation to what he's been saying. So Dr. Asah-Asante, I indicated that it seems Ukraine is now having to do this fight alone. Russia is a nuclear power. I'm just wondering, one of the things I heard on the BBC just this morning when I was coming in, the offer had been made for talks in Minsk in Belarus. The Russians are saying that they will stop if Ukraine surrenders, and that is certainly not an option for the Ukrainian president. The United Nations resolution pushed forward by the Americans failed, obviously, at the Security Council because Russia has a veto. It's now going to go to the plenary. So I'm just wondering, what can the Western powers do more?
That's one thing we must say, that Western powers, in spite of all these difficulties, have done their bit. Because let us remember that Ukraine is not part of NATO. And all these Western powers are part of NATO. So they have a very difficult situation. But that aside, you have seen over the years, when the build-up started, the effort by Western powers to, be with Ukraine has been there. Except that, if you look at it right now, events leading to this, we saw a little relax on the part of I don't know whether it's Ukraine or the Western powers. But the good news is that when I was coming, I was also listening to a gentleman who was serving in the UN regard to what as secretary to the NATO group, saying that the best way out now is to be able to create a safe passage so that military equipment can be supplied to Ukraine, for them to be able to defend themselves. And there is an argument that, once you are not part, the NATO will not be able to give you the kind of support that you need. But
yes, they've indicated clearly there will be no boots on the ground.
Yes, but Article 4 of their, constitution gives them the power to discuss that whenever a member of NATO is being threatened, that you have the opportunity to discuss and have a consensus on that matter, and then you move in to support. If they are going to trigger that provision of the Constitution, I'm sure they will be able to provide the necessary assistance to Ukraine, for Ukraine to be able to weather the storm. It's a very difficult situation Ukraine finds itself, but I believe that the way things are going, the Western world will not sit down for Ukraine to be overrun by Russia. That I know for sure will not happen, because if you look at the pusher of Britain now, the pusher of America and others within the NATO bloc, they are now making every effort to be able to help so that Ukraine is able to live peacefully.
I'll come back to a bit more on the help, because the sanctions regime is the economic warfare.
Yes.
So there are questions about whether it's really impactful. So I'll come back to you on that. Let's speak to the Honorable Okudzeto Ablakwa, who is the ranking member for the Foreign Affairs Committee in Parliament and also MP for North Tongu. He was very concerned about our Ghanaian students in Ukraine and in Russia, and he had been advocating for evacuation. Mr. Ablakwa, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Jifa.
Great. Are you satisfied with the recent announcements made by the Foreign Ministry about steps being taken to evacuate our Ghanaian students or Ghanaian compatriots in Ukraine specifically?
Well, thank you very much. Good morning to the panel and good morning to all distinguished viewers of the program. I must say that the latest shift in position by the government to take concrete steps to evacuate our nationals, particularly students stranded in Ukraine, is a positive development. And I would like to commend the government for this major shift in position. You'll recall that earlier in the week, when the only indication was that students should seek shelters and go into hiding, I said that it was inadequate and that was not a helpful posture, particularly considering the fact that other countries were taking more pragmatic steps to take their nationals out of danger zone. I followed keenly what the Indians did. I followed keenly what the French did, what Jamaica continues to do, and what the Nigerians are doing. And I thought that even though we do not have a resident diplomatic mission in Ukraine, it is possible to foster some bilateral partnerships with those who were conversant with the terrain, who had more logistical capacity and had elaborate escape plans, because some countries had some superior intelligence and so had prepared themselves more adequately in case of high escalation. And so I am glad that I am seeing now some movement. I have been in touch with the student leaders in Ukraine, NUKS Ukraine, and as we speak, a good number of them are in Bakhmut, and they tell me that the Polish border appears too choked now, and so they are using the Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania route. Those are the border points that they are headed to. And our diplomatic mission in Bern, Switzerland, so far is in touch with them, receiving regular updates, and arrangements have been made across the border to meet with those who are on the first trip as we speak. I have seen the movement plan of some other buses that will be moving from different cities, particularly in Kyiv, later today. And I think that these evacuation arrangements are heartwarming, and we should keep our prayers and our thoughts with our nationals in Ukraine. Let us pray that the good Lord will bring them out of harm's way to safety. I must add too that there was some little skirmishes yesterday, which I followed keenly. Some of our students who were in a train which came under attack from the Russian artillery, but thanks be to God, they escaped unhurt. So it's quite a dangerous situation, and so far it is to the glory of God that none of our nationals have been hurt or been part of the casualty numbers, and so it is really positive.
Okay,
but
let me come in, Mr.
Yeah.
Blakwa, and ask you about Ghana on a level of international position on what's been happening in Ukraine and Russia. And many Ghanaians have some link to Ukraine, to Russia. Many of our people had studied in the Eastern Bloc as well. There's been a UN Security Council resolution which unfortunately failed. Ghana, together with Gabon, backed the US resolution, but it's failed and it's now going to go to the plenary, I understand. Is there anything other than that we can do, or should we not be taking sides against a major nuclear power?
Honestly, the time has come for us to re-echo the position that we have always taken as a country, so far as our foreign policy imperatives are concerned, that the United Nations needs urgent reform. I mean, how does the UN look when yesterday such a major resolution seeking to end hostilities, seeking to cause a ceasefire in Ukraine, all countries, the majority of countries at the Security Council, remember that Ghana has just taken over a seat from now to the end of 2023. You have a situation where only one country, Russia, which ironically is chairing the Security Council for this month, the Russian Permanent representative to the UN, raised his hand and vetoed the decision. So it didn't matter what the majority of countries at the UN Security Council wanted. Just because Russia is a member of the P5, their decision did not matter. So we have been calling for reforms for decades. That, you see, the United Nations is becoming impotent, is becoming moribund, and risks, if care is not taken, the United Nations may become, like its predecessor organization, the League of Nations, which collapsed. We do not want the United Nations to collapse like the League of Nations. The only way to avoid that is to have reforms. We cannot have a situation where only 5 countries can veto, and it doesn't matter what the position is of all 188 members of the United Nations. This cannot be a democratic organization, and we must use this opportunity to re-echo this urgent demand for UN reforms. It is absolutely unacceptable for us to continue to have this P5 arrangement. And now the other P5 members are seeing the danger of this. You know, they have also used it in time past to suit their narrow geopolitical interests. The Russians are using it today. The next time it may be America, it may be China, it may be France. This cannot continue. And we must have a situation where we democratize properly the United Nations to avoid it becoming irrelevant or extinct like the League of Nations. Having said that, I must also add that if you look at how India and China abstained in yesterday's vote, it tells us that Russia is building some coalition, and that it is not the case that all countries in the world appear to, if you like, be opposed to Putin or be supporting the Western allies. Now, remember that as a country, we have always believed in the doctrine of non-alignment, the doctrine that was propounded by Nkrumah, Nehru, Tito, and Nasser. They are the founders of the non-aligned movement. We neither look left nor right. But it doesn't mean that we should be neutral in the face of wrongdoing. It doesn't mean that we should be neutral in the face of aggression, in the face of undermining the sovereignty of other nations. So it is important that we walk the tightrope and do not, in the process, if you like, jeopardize our own national interest. But we should be guided largely by the principle of non-alignment. But having said that, there has been a lot of talk about the economic implications of this. But I am even more worried about the security implications for Ghana and for our sub-region.
What could those security implications be?
Yes, the security implications are that, as we speak, our sub-region is not safe at all. You are aware of the growing incident of terrorism. We have violent extremists who are all over, who have taken over majority of the land sites in Burkina Faso. They've done same in Mali. And the Sahel is one of the most dangerous places. It has become a haven of terrorists. The Al-Qaeda of the Maghreb, ISIS, Boko Haram, and what have you. And they are all moving down south. Only 2 weeks ago, Benin suffered another attack. Togo has come under attack. Burkina Faso has been under attack. Ivory Coast. So all our neighbors have been under attack. Now, remember that France has been helpful. They have about 5,000 troops in the sub-region helping us to contain the threat. You also have the Russians who send troops in Mali helping us to contain the threat. The Wagner group aligned to Russia has also been helpful. Now, because of this Russia-Ukraine war, the attention has totally shifted, and troops will soon be moved out of our sub-region, and it's going to give these terrorists, these violent extremists in our sub-region a field day, a total field day. to wreak havoc. So I see a lot of talk about the economic implications, rising cost of crude prices and all of that. But I think what we should be worried more about is the security implications because of how our sub-region has become so volatile, the proliferation of weapons, the insurgencies, the low intensity, terrorism, and all the violent attacks that we have suffered as a sub-region in recent months. And we must be deeply, deeply worried about that.
Okay. Many thanks to you, Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, Ranking Member on the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, MP for North Tongu. So let me come back to you, Dr. Asa Asante, and then later I'll come to Prince. So the sanctions regime, it's not necessarily hit the gas and oil receipts of Russia. I understand the international SWIFT system, that's the international banking payment SWIFT system. Ideally, if we really wanted to hit where it hurt most, then what the West would then do would be to take Russia off that. But as you've said, they're dependent significantly on Russian gas, Russian oil. So it looks like, and since they've not moved in troops, and the Ukrainians are struggling with this alone, it doesn't look like Russia will have any, interest in stopping what they're doing.
I think all that, what you are saying is true. It's a good observation. But if NATO is able to sit and brainstorm over the issue, they should be able to find a lasting solution, which I have told you about, that they need to trigger the Article 4. Now that, yes, even though this body, this country is not part of NATO, but because you are close to other NATO groups, that whatever affects you can equally affect them. So you need to now have a consensus on that. Once they get that consensus, then they begin to provide the necessary assistance that they need to deal with that. And then it's a difficult one because you don't know which of the strategies to use. Are you going to go by the SWIFT approach? Look at your finances and see whether you can stop that. Even if you do that, would that stop? Because if you look at Russia, they have a lot of resources that, even if you block somewhere, they are able to survive and all that. So it calls for reflection and a call for NATO sitting down to, as it were, assess the situation and then do something miraculously to assist Ukraine.
What would you want the Ukrainians themselves to do now? We've seen what they've been able to do. Ordinary people are, pledging their support to fight and all that. But there are significant risks involved.
There are a lot because, you see, scholars are even worried about the nuclear program that they have. If Russia is to hit that,
that's the Chernobyl nuclear power plant
and all that. So they must take, there's a time that they must also take serious reflection on their security situation and decide which direction to go and all that. They are in a very difficult situation.
Should they surrender?
That is a difficult one because there's an independent state. Why somebody who is going to annex my state, why should I surrender to give my state to that? That's a difficult thing for an independent state to do, especially the fact that if I have not wronged you, why is it? Even if I've wronged you, do you have the power to annex my country and all that? It's a difficult one. I'm not sure that option will be very good for them to take. But that they are friends, they are allies. This is a time that they need, Ukraine need their support so much to be able to survive these things. Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back to Prince shortly. Let's just take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk to Prince about the students and what their needs could be. And then I'll raise the issues Mr. Ablakwa raised about reform of the UN Security Council as well with Dr. Asa Asante. Thanks for staying with us. We'll be right back. And of course, with some of your messages. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. Let me read some of your messages. And on the Ukraine issue, they've been coming through thick and fast. This one from Papa J Jr. For the sake of lives, people, and the betterment of Ukraine, I don't think President Putin wants I don't think President Putin wants the president to step down or something, but he rather wants to be the president. This one from God MC says, Jifai, it would be prudent if your guest retracts the name of the NDC in relation to the infiltration of buying of forms, David Adu. Okay, so that's, the guest didn't say anything wrong. He was just using that as an example. And all the other messages from Papa J Jr. Mr. T.I. says, did you hear Putin yesterday? He wants the president out before he negotiates. Thank you very much for those messages. Let's speak quickly to Alex Mould. He's a former GNPC chief executive. Let's speak to him about the concerns about increasing oil prices. Good morning, Mr. Mould. Thank you for joining us. So there are concerns that prices of oil is going up partly because of this crisis. We know that OPEC countries can increase production to suppress the level of increase. Can that be done, and how soon?
Well, first of all, the world's dependence on Russia for certain commodities cannot be overestimated. We're talking about gas, crude oil, coal, and iron, ore, aluminium, and all of those petrochemicals. Many international oil companies and utilities are invested in Russia. So, you know, the global consensus by most of the researchers is that the effect is not going to be immediate. And that although that they had expected oversupply of crude oil in the market in the short term, mainly because Iran oil will be coming in, they have now increased their forecast for the average price of oil, for Brent oil, from $75 to $85. The spike we saw, where oil went above $100 for the first time since 2014, was just a response by speculators and traders who thought that this was going to cause a problem, a supply and demand problem, but there is excess supply in the world. Russia produces about 12 million barrels a day, so does Saudi Arabia. They have the capacity to do that, and also that the USA. The USA consumes the most oil by any country, and Russia has about 4.8 million barrels a day it exports. Saudi Arabia exports most of its oil. Saudi Arabia and OPEC have excess capacity of almost 5 million barrels, 4.8 million barrels, of which Saudi Arabia controls nearly half of that, 2.3 million barrels. So the consensus by researchers and the traders whom I have spoken to in the last week or so was, yes, they were a little concerned about the immediate impact where you will see spikes, because there are issues to do with Russia not supplying gas to Europe. But the fact of the matter is, Europe needs that gas, and Europe and the USA are not going to put any sanctions on gas and oil in the short term. However, as we speak, Europe is now receiving gas from other Asian suppliers, just to ensure that Putin will not call the, given that we are at the peak of winter, and this is where it will be felt in Europe. Most people cannot switch from gas to liquid, that is mainly gas oil or crude oil, to power their power plants and also for heating oil or for heating in the houses. It's only Germany that has that capacity to do that. So Europe is very vulnerable as we speak, and Putin knows that. The USA also knows that, and the USA recently, a few days ago, the Biden administration said they will not sanction Russian crude oil because that would harm U.S. consumers and not Vladimir Putin. The statement they said was the sanctions will not target oil flows as we go forward. But knowing the U.S., they can change their policy faster than anybody if there is pressure. Another issue with the USA is the consumer. Recently, the Biden administration has been hit by inflation. And just last year, we saw him release 50 million barrels of reserve oil to cushion the inflation that was going on in the U.S. They do not have the capacity to do that again. They will be releasing some of their reserves to ensure that the price of petrol in the U.S. does not spike above $4 per barrel. Sorry, $4 per gallon. And I think the other issue has to do with, apart from the fundamentals of supply and demand, as I said, there is not enough supply in the world. And OPEC also has the capacity to bridge the shortfall that would come from any Russian withdrawal of their oil. But the other concern is the corporate concern. There are a lot of corporations in the U.S. and in Europe that have invested in Russia. And it does not seem like the sanctions are going to be against these companies. One of the issues is Russia, if sanctions are put on Russia, Russia may not be able to refinance its bonds that are maturing. And that could be an issue. But Russia has reserves. They have $50 billion in reserves, and they have anticipated this by NATO and the OECD allies, that they have made sure they have enough money to meet the near term in the next 2 to 3 years refinancing of their bonds.
Okay, so Mr. Mould, yeah. So Mr. Mould, in terms of Ghana, then what can we do about our fuel prices? Because there is the concern that we're going to see a breaking of the current prices beyond 8 cedis a litre. Is there anything we can do, since the Americans, they have taken steps to do that?
I think Ghana is not too much of a problem at the moment because oil prices are not going to spike. They do, yes, we'll see our fuel prices go up. But our concern should be more on the foreign exchange. We were buying foreign exchange at $6 per a dollar, and now in the market it is over 7 cedis and 20 pesos. That is what is going to increase the oil prices, the petroleum prices in this country. Like I said, the forecast for 2022 is $85 for Brent now. It was initially pegged at $75. So I don't think we should be in a big predicament right now, and there should be no panic at the moment. However, government should ensure that we have supply of fuel, supply of petroleum products. We have to lock in our supply of petroleum products. Russia supplies about 20% of the gas oil in Europe. And if that supply is down, there will be initial and interim spikes of gas oil. That is diesel.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mould, for sharing your expertise with us on this subject. Much appreciated. So let me come to Prince. So Prince, the students are moving. Honorable Okudzeto Ablakwa confirmed that. Have you been in touch with families? Are families reaching out, saying maybe they've not heard from their ward or their child who is away in Ukraine?
Yes. Several calls from families, including families in Ghana, families in US, and all those, trying to, understand the state of their words and then what we are doing. And then, yes, I keep assuring them and then giving them the stuff we are doing to make sure their words are safe and then gets back to Ghana.
Is every Ghanaian student in Ukraine seeking to leave, or there will be some who will stay?
Definitely there will be some who will stay, but the majority who wants to leave, we are trying all we could to get in touch with them and also get them like to a safe place so that they can come back to Ghana.
Now, what happens to your education then? Because in Ghana, one of the reasons maybe some of you run away to go to Ukraine is because of strike and co. But now here we are with a military crisis that may interrupt your studies.
Well, maximum, I mean, we are just analyzing the maximum. It should be like 3 months.
You are hoping that this will be over in 3 months?
Yeah, that's what we are hoping for. But, I mean, if by 3 months, or if within the 3 months, anything, I mean, something positive comes out, then definitely we might not be able to go offline as quick, but probably maybe we might continue in the distant medium.
So distant learning.
Yes.
So for now, you're doing online lessons as a medical student. What about the others? I know many go in to study pharmacy, engineering, and languages.
Yeah, definitely. We all have to switch to the distance medium, and then because even my school, they issued a notice that was like few days, that was somewhere last week, Thursday, stating that because of that, like there won't be any class.
There will not be physical in-person class.
Not even in-person, online class, because the network issues is also some ways.
So there are network issues. What about the lecturers? Are they able to teach? Because if some are trying to leave the country and all that, will there be lecturers to teach?
At this point, they are all fighting.
They're all fighting for survival.
Yeah, so the teaching will be on hold like for some time. I mean, probably maybe when things stabilize a bit, because it turns out that, I mean, they are not only targeting the military, but also some civilians. There have been some civilian casualties as well. So it's a bit dicey now. We are just hoping that, I mean, it shouldn't affect the education that much. But definitely at this point, yes, there's an effect on that. But we are
There's
just
an
hoping.
effect on the education.
Yeah.
All right, but I think you mentioned that you had to pay your tuition up to a point.
Yeah.
So everyone has to at least pay their tuition up to a point before they can continue. So for now, some are having online classes, some are not.
Yeah, some were not. But after the first attack, all schools decided to switch.
To shut down for now.
Yeah, to switch to distance medium, and then, I mean, assess the situation, how it will go and everything.
Okay. Dr. Asah-Asante, you're a lecturer yourself. I mean, for the students, what do you see them doing? He says they hope this will be over in 3 months.
Yeah, for them, that's how they will speak, and you can understand them because they want to, develop themselves, build capacity, and make meaningful life. That we can understand. But the stark reality, we will see as we
can't put a timeline on this.
No, we cannot. But the good news is that they've given them another alternative. That this is the other mode, online mode, where you can take. That's a good one because it's not only Ghanaian students who are there. If you look at Africa, Morocco have about 800 people there.
Morocco, 800.
Yeah. And then,
I think the Nigerians have the largest number.
Yeah, Nigeria have 400.
4,000.
Sorry, 4,000. Morocco 8,000.
Okay, Morocco has 8,000.
Yeah, Morocco.
Wow.
And then Ghana 1,000. Okay. So there are a lot. And if you look at even South Africa investment in Russia, about $5 billion. Right. So it's a very.
So for you, the economic sanctions will affect others more than it will affect the Russian state.
Yes. Because you see, if you look at the things Russia has built for itself over the years, it has been able to put itself in a position that they become the sine qua non, without which not. But that's why I like NATO to come in, assess all the situation, and see how best they can help Ukraine. Because if they leave Ukraine alone, it's going to be difficult. But as I've said, from the pusher of the European powers, they are ready to assist Ukraine to come out of this situation. It's a very difficult one. It's not only going to affect people in Europe, but as our friend Mr. Okudzeto said, even security.
Yes, I wanted, please move on to that point because it's two things. The UN Security Council resolution failed. China, India, and the United Arab Emirates, they abstained. Russia imposed this veto. Ghana, Kenya, Brazil, Mexico, Gabon, Albania, Ireland, Norway, France, United Kingdom, United States, they supported the resolution. Mr. Okudzeto Ablakwa says it's time to look at a reform of the United Nations, the Security Council. Do you see that happening in our lifetime?
We hope and pray we get there. because you see, events of the world should give us a cause to do this, and in no time, because we don't want to travel the lines of what the League of Nations, which fizzle out in no time.
Even
And
the
then-
non-aligned
Yes.
movement, it's been a long
Yes.
time.
So we need to do serious reforms in anticipation for things like this, so that we can contain the situation. If you look at the Africa, Russia has, a lot of support for some of the countries in fighting terrorism and all that. You are now going to have a very difficult situation on your hand now. And then look at the space of military coups and all that. If these people join forces, terrorists with, military adventurers, then we are going to be in difficulty and all
So
that.
there's a security threat to
Definitely,
us in Africa that we, and even in the West African sub-region, we need to look
Definitely, because where Russia is giving support to fight, insurgency and other military groups, obviously they are going to withdraw that, and then we are left, to face the full, rigor of the situation. And that is where the difficulty is. So, but this should give us what? Food for thought, that we should begin to also build capacity to support ourselves, where over dependent on certain, world powers for some of these things. We should be able to chart a new path, because a time will come that when they themselves are in difficulty, you can't get support from anywhere.
So we have natural gas. We should
Yes.
develop those resources
Build capacity.
so that we can bring the
Exactly.
prices.
I am saying this because if things change, and we hope and pray they don't change in a worse position, we change positively so that we have a breather, you are going to see diversion of money into rearmament, where people are now going to produce more weapons to support, to pursue the agenda and all that. That will work against poverty eradication. It will work against even, look at, within this time we have what, COVID on our hands, in Europe and all that. How do we fight this? You are going to have a whole lot of problem, including what? Education is going to be truncated and all that in those areas. Inequality is going to increase. Climate change, we are worried about what? Climate. And when the bombs and all that begin to be thrown out, obviously you are not going to absorb yourself from what problems of what the climate and all that. The world is not ready for that. It is my hope and prayer that we see Europe, putting in more effort, supporting NATO, so that they sit down, reflect on this issue, and then contain it, so that it doesn't degenerate and create problems for us.
Quick points on the Ghana and, should I say, African Union, ECOWAS response. Any thoughts there in terms of our foreign policy approach?
They've started talking in support of, Ukraine and NATO and all that. I think as they assess the situation, they will be able to take a very decisive situation. Now is the time to reflect and see whether we can proffer any solution to help Ukraine and, for that matter, NATO and all that. This is a time people need to be sober, reflect on issue, and then get ideas thrown out so that we deal with this. It's a very difficult situation.
Very
because if you
difficult.
look at the tentacles of Russia in terms of
It's
economics,
engulfing everyone.
security, and this, you need a careful, balance of these issues in order to go around it. And I'm sure Western world has the competence to do that. It's a matter of time, and then we need it very fast.
Prince, your final words to, students, Ghanaians, people who have any link, close or other, with, students in Ukraine or those who are trying to come out, and also the work you've all been doing for them.
Okay, so first of all, my last words, I would just like to thank the embassies, the missions in the neighboring countries, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, because I just received a notification that some couple of Ghanaians have landed in Romania with a good treat, with free food and other stuff. I would like to commend the government on that for swift action, and also to all the people who, are still on board to get to the neighboring countries. I wish them a safe trip, and then we are always with them in prayer, and then we hope that they get there safely. And then to all the parents and anybody who has a relative ward in Ukraine, please calm down, don't be crying, everything will be okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And I really want to say thanks to our guests today. Many thanks to you, Dr. Asa Asante, for spending the last 3 hours with us. Many thanks to Alex Mould, former CEO of GMPC, Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and to you, Prince Danso Tenakwa, NUGS Ukraine Secretary, and to all of you who sent your messages, to all of you who tweeted, and to our entire production team. I'm Jifa Bampo. Thank you for joining us. Up next is Warm Up Plus.